In the history of modern warfare, there are few milestones as significant as the creation of a complete nuclear triad. For most of the 20th century, the nuclear balance of power was dominated by two nations, the United States and the Soviet Union, both of which built enormous arsenals designed to guarantee their survival through the logic of deterrence. The idea was simple yet terrifying. If one nation launched a nuclear attack, the other could still retaliate with devastating force, ensuring that no rational actor would dare begin such a war. The ability to launch nuclear weapons from land-based missiles, from strategic bombers in the air, and from submarines hidden deep beneath the ocean became known as the nuclear triad, and it was the ultimate symbol of superpower status. For decades, China lagged behind, possessing only a modest number of nuclear weapons and relying primarily on land-based systems that were vulnerable to preemptive strikes. Yet over time, through decades of determination, trial, and costly innovation, China steadily closed the gap. Today, the story of the JL-1 missile marks the moment when China stepped into the elite club of nations that could truly claim to wield a survivable and credible nuclear deterrent. When the JL-1, also known as JULANG-1 or Giant Wave -1, was first conceived, China faced daunting challenges. The nation was still rebuilding from years of economic isolation and political turmoil, while its military technology lagged far behind that of the United States and the Soviet Union. Developing a submarine-launched ballistic missile was an ambitious goal, requiring mastery of rocketry, guidance systems, nuclear warhead miniaturization, and naval engineering. Unlike land-based missiles, which could be deployed from silos or mobile launchers, submarine-launched missiles demanded a design that could survive the pressures of deep-sea storage, withstand the shock of underwater launch, and then operate flawlessly once in the air. For a nation still experimenting with missile technology, this was an extraordinary leap forward. Yet the Chinese leadership recognized that without a sea-based deterrent, its nuclear arsenal would remain fragile. Land-based missiles could be destroyed in a first strike, and its small fleet of bombers lacked the reach and survivability to guarantee retaliation. Only by placing nuclear weapons on submarines could China hope to ensure that even if its territory were struck, it would still be able to respond. The JL-1 was designed with compactness and functionality in mind. Measuring just over 10 meters in length with a diameter of roughly 1.5 meters, it was tailored to fit into the narrow tubes of the Type 092 Shaw-class submarine, China's first attempt at a ballistic missile submarine. On the outside, it presented a streamlined, functional appearance, with a sharply pointed nose cone housing its nuclear warhead, a two-stage body coated with materials to resist both the ocean environment and the heat of atmospheric re-entry, and reinforced casing to withstand the stresses of launch. It was not a missile designed for show or parades, but for survival and reliability in the harshest conditions imaginable. The JL-1 solid-fuel propulsion system was itself a breakthrough, marking China's transition from liquid-fueled missiles, which were cumbersome, volatile, and required long preparation times, to a safer, faster, and more modern technology. Solid fuel allowed the JL-1 to be stored for long periods and launched quickly, giving it a readiness that older systems lacked. Inside the missile, the engineering was both simple and effective. It was a two-stage solid-fuel design, with the first stage responsible for propelling the missile out of the ocean and into the upper atmosphere, while the second stage ignited to carry the warhead toward its target. The inertial guidance system provided the missile with accuracy sufficient for regional deterrence, though not comparable to the pinpoint precision of American or Soviet missiles. Still, its accuracy was adequate for nuclear weapons, whose destructive power could devastate entire cities. The warhead itself was estimated to carry a yield between 200 and 300 kilotons, far more powerful than the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and enough to obliterate major urban centers or military bases. The JL-1's range of approximately 1,700 kilometers meant it could not strike the continental United States from Chinese waters, but it was never designed to. Instead, it was aimed at giving China leverage within its region. From launch positions in the Yellow Sea or the East China Sea, it could reach Japan, South Korea, U.S. bases in Guam, and parts of the Soviet Far East. For Beijing, this was enough to guarantee that any attempt to coerce or attack China would risk devastating retaliation against nearby adversaries. It was a regional weapon with strategic implications, a first step toward the intercontinental capabilities that later missiles like the JL-2 and JL-3 would provide. One of the most important aspects of the JL-1 was its cold launch system. Launching a missile from beneath the ocean presents unique dangers. If the rocket ignites inside the submarine tube, the resulting heat and pressure could destroy the submarine itself. To solve this, the JL-1 was designed to be ejected from its tube using compressed gas. Once it cleared the surface of the water, its first-stage motor would ignite, sending it into the sky. This system dramatically reduced the risks to the submarine and increased the safety of the crew. It also allowed China to deploy the missile even with relatively primitive submarine technology, as the Shaw-class submarine was notoriously noisy and not as advanced as its Western or Soviet counterparts. Although the JL-1's performance was limited compared to the giants of the Cold War, its significance cannot be overstated. For the first time, China had the ability to strike back even if its land-based arsenal was destroyed. This survivability is the essence of nuclear deterrence. Without it, a nuclear power is vulnerable to preemptive attack. With it, the equation changes forever. Adversaries must assume that even a successful first strike will be answered with devastating retaliation, making the cost of aggression unbearable. This is why the JL-1 shocked the world, not because it was the most advanced missile, but because it represented the completion of China's nuclear triad. Safety was another key consideration. The JL-1 incorporated electronic locks and fail-safe mechanisms to prevent unauthorized launches, environmental sensors to ensure the warhead remained stable under changing conditions, and multiple layers of redundancy to reduce the risk of accidental detonation. Combined with its solid fuel design and cold launch system, these features made the JL-1 relatively safe to store and operate compared to earlier generations of missiles. Beyond its technical attributes, the JL-1 had unique symbolic value. It represented China's determination to stand shoulder to shoulder with the world's nuclear superpowers. For decades, the United States and the Soviet Union had dominated global nuclear strategy, while China remained a secondary player. With the JL-1, Beijing declared that it too could guarantee its survival and could not be coerced or intimidated by nuclear threats. This was not merely a weapon, but a political statement, a message that China had arrived as a strategic force to be reckoned with. The cost of developing the JL-1 and the Shaw-class submarine was immense, especially for a country that was still developing economically. Billions of dollars were poured into research, testing, and construction, and many failures were encountered along the way. Test launches often ended in explosions or misfires, and the Shaw-class submarine itself suffered from numerous technical issues. Yet the Chinese leadership persevered, convinced that the price was worth paying for the survival of the nation. In the end, the investment paid off, not only in the creation of the JL-1 but also in the foundation it provided for future systems. The experience gained in developing the JL-1 directly contributed to the more advanced JL-2 and JL-3 missiles, which today give China global reach and the ability to strike anywhere on Earth. The impact of the JL-1 was not measured in raw numbers, as China's arsenal remained far smaller than those of the United States and Russia. Instead, it was measured in credibility. Before the JL-1, China's nuclear deterrent was vulnerable and potentially ineffective. After the JL-1, it became survivable, forcing adversaries to account for the possibility of retaliation from hidden submarines. This shift altered strategic calculations in Washington, Moscow, Tokyo, and beyond, and it cemented China's position as a true nuclear power. When the world first realized that China had successfully deployed a submarine-launched ballistic missile, the reaction was one of shock. Analysts who had long dismissed China's nuclear capabilities were forced to reconsider. The missile itself may have been limited in range and sophistication, but its existence proved that China was capable of developing advanced strategic weapons on its own. In the decades since, the JL-1 has been overshadowed by newer, more powerful missiles, but its legacy remains secure. It was the missile that completed China's nuclear triad, the weapon that transformed China's deterrent from fragile to credible, and the symbol of a nation's determination to never again be at the mercy of foreign powers. The JL-1 also carried lessons for the future. Its development exposed weaknesses in China's submarine technology, highlighting the need for quieter, more survivable submarines to carry the missiles. This led to the eventual construction of the Type 094 and Type 096 submarines, which today patrol the oceans with far more advanced JL-2 and JL-3 missiles. In this sense, the JL-1 was a stepping stone, a necessary first step on the road to modern strategic parity. Without it, China could not have built the formidable arsenal it possesses today. Ultimately, the story of the JL-1 is not about perfection, but about determination. It was not the most powerful missile, nor the most accurate, nor the longest range. But it was enough. Enough to deter adversaries, enough to guarantee survival, enough to shock the world. And in the dangerous logic of nuclear strategy, enough is all that matters. For China, the JL-1 was proof that it could rise from vulnerability to credibility, from weakness to deterrence, and from regional power to global actor. It was the missile that gave China a voice in the nuclear conversation, and it remains a milestone in the history of modern warfare.